This is a very critical thing I think everyone should do when they're mixing. It works very well for me. It's a Bob Horn tip. Now, when you're mixing and you got a lot of tracks, especially, this matters. Break down what the four most important things are in the song. We're talking usually drums, bass. Now, whatever the main instrument is, that could be, depends on the band. Is it pianos? Is it guitars? What's the main instrument? And vocals. Those four things, you start there in your mix. A lot of people get hung up on top-down mixing, or or do they start with the drums and then and then build from there? It's not really relevant to me whether you do either one of those. I know what works better for me. What works better for me is I set my mix bus in a way that usually works for a lot of things, generally like a compressor, an EQ, a tape plug-in of some kind, a limiter, and then I get to the mix. Just setting that stuff kind of gives me a ballpark of I'm now in the realm of boost a little low end, boost a little top end, compress a little bit. I want 2 to 4 dB of compression, maybe even a little less. Could be more in some cases, but general 2 to 4 dB of compression, with like an SSL comp or an API 2500, something like that. And, ATR 102 plugin kind of thing. And that starts the game. But then when I get to the tracks themselves, I don't focus on every little thing. The drums to me are the most important, one of the most important focuses. You hear that snare the most throughout the entire song, probably more than anything. So the drums are very critical. That means the first thing I try to do is make the drums sit well with not by itself. It doesn't matter. That's why I don't like the concept of starting by mixing drums. I don't care what they sound like by themselves. How do they stack up with the other instruments in the song that are very important, like the bass, like the main instruments, whether it's guitars or whatever, and the vocals? So in other words, if I think about every overdub that was done, that could be percussion added later, like auxiliary percussion. Maybe it's, some ridiculous triangle and bongos. Maybe you got some solo lead stuff happening over top. Maybe you've got some violins, some birds chirping, a couple llamas, whatever you got. That stuff doesn't need to be EQ'd like crazy. Like, that's the way I think about it is you won't know if you're going to over EQ that stuff, and you don't want to over EQ it, but you won't know if you're doing that until you set everything else in place. When people think how much high end should they put in a song or how much low end, it's all relative to what? Relative to what else is there. And that means the main instruments, the pillars of the song, have to be in place before you know how much high end something else should have that's not a main instrument. So rather than go through and EQ the triangle and then EQ the tambourine and EQ the bird chirping, you got to first get the basics in place. So you'll know how much high end you should put on a triangle, for example, after you have your drum sounding great with the vocals and the guitars and the bass, and you know how much high end you put on your snare. Once you got that sounding good where your snare's EQ'd and the overheads are sitting in such a way where the hi-hat's not in the way of the snare and all, and the hi-hat's not in the way of the vocals, like once you got all that stuff going, now you'll know whether or not you need to brighten up something else to make it fit, or if it doesn't need any EQ and it's just about balance. All right. So I think people go about it all wrong when you go in to tweak everything without having the basics in place. Even if you go one thing at a time down the line of everything in the song, that's a terrible move, in my opinion. I don't like that as an idea because this is what will happen. If you start with the kick drum and then you mix the entire song all the way down, every instrument, what's going to happen is then you're going to be like, where'd my kick drum go at the end? You're going to have to go back and make the kick now punch through more. And you may have to do that with a lot of important things. Whereas what you should be doing is the song should be able to be played back in a way that you like it without all that auxiliary stuff. That's not the make or break the song type stuff, most likely, the extras. It's great stuff, probably. I'm not diminishing maybe it needs to be there. But you should be able to play that song back as if it was like a 3-piece band and a singer. So 4-piece. That should be enough to make this song sound really good. And if that doesn't sound good, then no amount of adding the triangle is going to help you. in my opinion. It's just kind of a waste of time to do everything, and that's why I find some tracks I'll get will have, like, the tambourine EQ'd already. It's like, why? Like, it doesn't it's just hurting it, you know? Whereas you would know, for example, on auxiliary percussion stuff, like timpanis or something, like, bongos or whatever, if that's auxiliary stuff and there are drums there, what Bob Horn would do a lot of times is he'll set that behind the drums, but he'll add some top end to it to make it poke out. So he'll find those wherever the attack is of those instruments, make it poke out, but put it behind the important drums. So in other words, they're great to have there. You want to hear them so they cut through. So he adds some top, but they're not so loud that they're taking up a lot of valuable space that needs to be occupied by the things that are driving the song. So when you keep this stuff in mind, it becomes easier to mix, not harder, because once you get rocking where you're loving the way it sounds, adding those extra things will be more of a question of panning. I can't tell you how many times that's a go-to thing for me, but it's not always obvious, and I recognize it in lessons when it's like, okay, the guitar solo is kind of getting buried. Now, why is it getting buried? And then I look at the way it's panned, and I try to pose it as a question, like, where are the other guitars in your mix? They're hard left, hard right. Okay, where's the solo? Hard left and hard right. There's your problem. Get the solo in a different place, and all of a sudden you'll hear it. And this is like for all of those auxiliary things, especially like little riffs you might have come in here or there, the ear candy things, you can make them significantly lower in the mix if there's movement. So by just messing with the automation for the panning, you could easily now pick up where that is with your ears at a much lower volume. So those things don't need to get in the way. All right. And I don't know, these kind of things are like the biggest, most important tips. Also, you're in the same way that you'll kind of get a sense for how much high end you need after you get your vocals set up and your, drums set up. A large portion of that is because the vocals have certain frequencies that no matter what you do, you can't avoid being prevalent in the mix. Like wherever that specific singer, like where their sibilance is. It could be different. One guy could be 4K, 5K, one guy could be 7K, 8K, 10K. Like, so you don't really know where that pain or the part that's like always there that you're going to have to deal with is going to be. But once you figure that out, then you can move other things around it. In other words, it doesn't have to always be a painful situation on the hi-hat in the same place as the vocal is. You can move where that hi-hat is. It's the same with like a triangle or something. Like you can move where the pain is on most other things, but on a vocal, it pretty much is where it is, and you just got to deal with it. So rather than have that combined with something else and make more pain, that's where you'll know where to fit the other stuff in. If you don't get it set from the important things first that you can't move, you're really putting yourself in a corner, and it'll be harder to deal with. In my opinion, huge, huge, huge tips that really will improve your mixes. So let me know if you dig it, if you have other ideas like similar to this or not. Throw questions, answers in the comments. I appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. It really helps the channel. Hit the like button. I appreciate it. Evan Jaffe Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.